The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Movie and TV Shows. Hey everyone, I'm Thomas Sanhuro. You're listening to The Secrets of Dune, where we're going to discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings of the 1984 David Lynch surrealist sci-fi classic. Joining me on the panel here today are Jack Barazzini. Hi, Jack.
Hey, how's it going?
Jack is with me on the Secrets of Tech podcast, so I'm excited to have him here in a different capacity doing the Secrets of Movie and TV. And also joining me tonight is Andrew Hermes. Hi, Andrew.
What's up, Thomas? It's going to be a little different than our Star Wars podcast, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So Andrew's joining me from our Secrets of Star Wars podcast, which are both other podcasts with the StarQuest Podcast Network. Go check them out. Definitely recommend them. We get into a lot of really cool discussions. But tonight we're going to be focusing on the Secrets of Dune. And we're planning now on this being the first in a series of discussions about the world of Frank Herbert's Dune and the various representations it's had leading up to the now sadly delayed until October 2021 Denis Villeneuve treatment of the tale. Yes,
It was my light at the end of the tunnel for this year, and
I know,
now
right?
It's taken from me.
Yeah, it was supposed to be the really good thing. It was happening in December. I was super looking forward to it, and now we're waiting until next year. I was surprised that they delayed it all the way until October. That was very interesting.
Yeah, I think that has to do with like all the other movies that they're having to slot in. So they're pushing back like James Bond, and I think Wonder Woman's getting delayed now too. So they just got to find a spot for it, I guess.
Yeah, it's not so much. It's not so much production schedules being delayed. It's just with movie theaters not open on a wide scale. It's studios are just afraid to release these big blockbuster movies.
I just hope that there's actually going to be movie theaters left when they decide to open them, because we've got a few closing now, and it's kind of like, if you guys keep delaying stuff, nobody's going to go to the movie theaters. They're not going to be there when you want to release the movie.
Disney will just buy them all.
Pretty much.
Exactly. There you go. Just Disney hubs. There you go. So tonight we're going to be starting with the 1984 movie because for many people, this is like the only exposure they've had to the story of Dune. I know that a lot of people, saw the movie in 1984, have seen it since, and they talk to me about, or I talk to them about Dune normally because I'm a complete fanatic. And they are like, oh, you mean that movie with the guy that floated around? it's like, no, man, come on. There's so much more to it than that. So I'd like to start kind of there in that spot of talking about, an introduction, where our introduction to the world of Arrakis is. And I think, Andrew, you're on that boat of having not read the book, but seen the movie, right?
Yes. I guess I'll have interesting perspective since I haven't read the book, but it's a property I've always been fascinated with. I have a copy of the book that I've probably had for, 15, 20 years. And I was like, I'll probably read it one day. But just never got around to it. Part of it being just maybe a little intimidated by, the reputation it holds being dense. I like dense sci-fi in my movies, not so much in my reading material. So, and another part of it is this, just forgetting that it exists. But, every once in a while, this property comes back into the pantheon of pop culture. And obviously now with Denis Villeneuve's movie, it's brought back to relevance. But yeah, the 1984 movie was my first introduction to this property. As you said,
awesome.
Like for a lot of people, and maybe not the best for most people,
Well, and that's I'm interested, because we're all kind of young, so I'm interested in when you saw it. Like, do you remember when you first saw it?
Yeah, I was in college, in the throes of film school, and just where I watched a lot of weird stuff. But I was a big David Lynch fan to begin with. Not a fan of all his work. I mean, he is a weird filmmaker. I'm sure we'll get into that. And this was definitely a stretch.
We will.
Yeah, definitely a stretch for David Lynch. But at the time, he was a hot director. I mean, obviously, we'll talk about him being considered for Return of the Jedi. But being a fan of his work, I'm like, I have to see this movie. I know this was not one of his favorite things to work on. But yeah, I had to watch it because of that. And I know we'll get into it, but I do appreciate the weirdness. I will say that.
Yeah. I think you kind of have to. If you're going to like this movie, you're going to like it for that, not in spite of it. So how about you, Jack? When did you see this one?
I actually watched this one for the first time a couple of years ago. I specifically put off watching the movie until I'd read the book. So I read the book and then I watched the movie with the book fresh in my mind.
Oh, nice.
And I kind of have to view the movies in two ways, because as an adaptation of the book, I don't think it succeeds. But as a weird 80s movie, I kind of like it. Because I love like schlocky weird B movies. So this is right up my alley of just like a studio funded this and they let them put this out. And I feel like you don't get that anymore. So I appreciate it on that level.
Yeah, that was so. I picked the book up when I was 15 years old. So I was the age of Paul Atreides when I read the book the first time. And I read that book nearly religiously for the next probably 10 years. I read every year. I read that book. I read it multiple times the first year. So I've read it over 15 times. And I knew about the movie and I knew the reputation the movie had. So I never watched the movie. I avoided it as much as I could until I was probably in my 20s. And then I just had to watch it. Like I knew David Lynch's reputation. I watched Mulholland Drive and I was like, there's no way a guy that made this movie did also any kind of treatment of Dune. I'm really intrigued at what ended up happening here. And then I think the other thing that really struck me about this movie was, the actors that are in it, who were some of them at the beginning of their career, some of them in the middle of their career, but at the beginning of their career as a, sci-fi mainstay. And, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to it, but it's really neat to see them in these roles and where they go from here and how their career kind of unfolds, or some of them kind of, this was the closing of their career too. So that's another way to look at it. And I think it's really interesting to look at like the ratings of this movie on Rotten Tomatoes, because it's got a 52%.
The audience ratings, actually, if you look at over the year, those have gone up. Right. I feel like this is one of those movies now where it's cool to say it's actually good, even though objectively it's not a good movie. But I appreciate the weird. I just think it's funny.
I think that's what the 50% is. Like, it's half the people are like, that weirdness is awesome, and the other half of the people are like, why did I just watch this? And
I'd only seen Eraserhead. That's the only other David Lynch movie I'd seen. So I'd seen that movie and I was like, Dune strikes me more as like something you give to Peter Jackson, not the guy who made whatever Eraserhead is.
Right? Can't really define what Eraserhead is.
Yeah.
So I was saying that, I was telling Jack before we started here that I gave my kids the challenge when I saw that the new movie was coming out, that if they read the book, I would take them opening night with me. And this is not something we do in my house. We don't go to movies opening night. So they were all like, yeah, okay. They were ready to do it. My 13-year-old picked it up immediately and just tore through the book.
Nice.
Got all the way through it. Loved it. And it wasn't until the preview for the movie came out that my daughter, who's 15, wanted to read the book. She was like, oh, that's a dad book. I don't really want to read it. It's a dad book. And then she saw the preview for the new movie that's coming out. And she was like, okay, I can read this. This looks like something that I'll actually enjoy. So, my son sat with us since he had watched it. He got to sit with us and watch it this time around. And he gave it a good 6 out of 10. He thought it didn't do a very good job of presenting the story, but for what it was not half bad. And I'm going to venture that I think the two biggest detractors from this movie were not only the weirdness of it, but the fact that in an age of about 90-minute movies, this clocked in at 2 hours and 17 minutes and didn't feel anywhere near complete at all.
No. Just the pacing is one of the worst things about this movie. Yeah. Like, you start off and then you have the Princess Irulan do this really awkward, disjointed equivalent of like the Star Wars crawl, but it's just like, here's everything that's going to happen. And then they have a part where she like cuts out and she's like, oh wait, I almost forgot. And then she comes back and keeps going. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm
like she's a
I don't
teenager.
know what he was
and you're
going
like,
for
wait,
there.
what?
Right.
Well, like Eraserhead, I mean, it's a floating head in space. I mean, if you watch a lot of his movies, they tend to open like that or contain, some sort of semblance of a floating head. So,
well, and it was weird because she was in front of the stars and she would like disappear and then come back and then disappear and come back. And I was like, there was no rhyme or reason as to why she was like, there wasn't anything back there. I was like, what am I looking for when she's gone?
Yeah. And I was timing when that was happening. I think you get like 15 minutes into the movie of just different scenes of exposition before the story really starts.
Well, I remember saying, I think they go to the beginning of the book now. I think they go to the beginning. Of the book. It was like I did it 3 times before they actually got to the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's that's a good point. I mean, bringing up exposition. I mean, that's another thing this movie fails at is just it's too much exposition. And like, I get it. Like, I know the reputation of the book, again, being dense, and there's just a lot there, but maybe they should have thought about splitting it up like Denis Villeneuve is planning to do, just doing half the book for the first film. But, Lynch wanted the movie to be more over, about 3 hours. I think his cut was like a little over 3 hours. His assembly cut was like 4 hours. So even kind of,
I'd be interested to see both of those, honestly.
Yeah. And, so I think that that's a recipe for just bad filmmaking is when, obviously when you hear the horror stories of a director not getting creative freedom, in the final cut,
right.
It usually spells the worst. And for a property like Dune, that was trying to compete with Star Wars or whatever it was trying to do, obviously it was. I mean, they had a toy line and they were prepping it to be, that Star Wars type of property. I think they were just aiming more for the commercial aspect and forgot about the storytelling aspect of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think David Lynch actually disowned this film when it came out. I think the original cut, they actually just credited it to Alan Smithy, which is the name they use if a director does not want to be associated with a movie.
That's right.
I did not know that about it. That's interesting. Well, yeah. And I think that with this one too, the exposition is kind of not important to the story. And that's the thing that really kills it, especially in the book. And so Andrew, when you go to read the book, you get the exposition through the story of Paul, not necessarily as this monolithic thing that then Paul fits into. So you kind of follow along as he's growing up, and you learn just as he's learning about the world that he's in, you learn about the world that he's in as well.
Right. And that's one of the things that I like so much about Dune that other sci-fi novels fail at. And what makes writing sci-fi so hard is that it feels like a real lived in world, and you just kind of pick up references as you go, and you can kind of infer a lot of the time what it's talking about, or how in the book each chapter begins with an excerpt from a fictional book within the universe, which is not something you can do on film.
Right. And I think that's why your comparison to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy is a good one, because, Tolkien was very good at that. The world was very lived in. It had a long history to it, and it built around the characters as you learned more about them. Right.
I always say that Dune is to sci-fi as to fantasy in terms of.
Yeah. And so, I think we've touched on it a lot, but I think, one of the things that's really cool about sci-fi is that it has a lot of different genres to it. And, because you got the space operas like Star Wars. And so we just come off of Return of the Jedi, and that space opera kind of feel was really big on people's minds. And then you got other ones like, I think one of my other favorites is the sci-fi thriller Event Horizon. That's
I really
a really
like that one.
Interesting take on science fiction and how things move. But this movie is like a very unique kind of thing. Like the only other one that comes even close is 2001 Space Odyssey, I think, to this sort of feel, and it really doesn't touch as far as the kind of surrealist bent that this one goes into. And we've talked a little bit about David Lynch at this point, so what do you guys feel about the like that feeling of the movie? Like let's talk really specifically about some of the, like, I don't know, the editorial decisions of like the way that the Guild Spicers looked and the weird color effects and things like that. How do you feel like all of that went into the movie?
Well, I feel like visually it's really, for its time, mostly I mean, with a few exceptions, obviously with the special effects and the CGI, a lot of it dated, a lot of it, even for its time, not so good looking, looking more like some old school Doctor Who, type of.
It does feel like that at times.
But for the most part, I think the costumes and the visuals, Lynch is a master at that, and it's a beautiful film. I mean, it really holds up from that aspect. From a genre point of view, this is more heady sci-fi 2001, Space Odyssey. Obviously not achieving the greatness or the narrative, I guess, the narrative excellence of that film. But it was more in that vein than Star Wars. It was the anti-Star Wars film, I guess. A lot of it's kind of has that reputation of being that, but obviously not succeeding so much box office wise. So yeah, I mean, it really, I think it tried to be that in a commercial landscape. Maybe it'll work as an art house movie. Like obviously you see Lynch's the rest of his career, is more in that vein. And I think after this experience, he just kind of figured that wasn't for him, and he's never done a real studio film since. But I think, it's just, it was a lofty goal. I mean, they were trying to make this movie, I think, for 20 years prior to that. And, they've ever since the book came out, essentially. And, I think they just, we have to wait till now for Denis Villeneuve to take for his take, and we'll see how that goes. But no one's tried to tackle it since. So, and it's the sci-fi movie, the sci-fi book of all sci-fi books. So yeah, I mean, I guess, like I said, you can appreciate the visuals and some of the campiness and the weirdness, but I think it ultimately fails, at the type of whatever mashup of a sci-fi genre they're trying to go for.
Right. I think I actually read something where they're talking about how their aim was to make Star Wars for grown-ups. So they were trying to make like a big epic science fiction movie that didn't feel like a kid's film the way the original Star Wars movie did. But a lot of it is just, I really like the set design. I feel like a lot of it feels very closed in though, like especially comparing it to a lot of other big epic movies. To me, almost more like something like the Ten Commandments or Ben-Hur, just in the pacing, than it does like Star Wars. And a lot of the sets are very closed in. It's very dark colors, so I feel like you don't really get to see the intricate details of the sets. And that might have just been the way the film was color graded, but I didn't like that aspect. And stylistic choices, like at one point he gives the Baron Harkonnen gives Thufir Hawat a cat and like this weird contraption that the cat's like being milked, and he has to make sure this cat is milked every day or he's going to die, with these weird heart plugs that they have implanted in all the slaves of the Harkonnens, which is neither of those things are in the book at all. So you just get all sorts of these weird, bizarre, stylistic things that happen. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. I think, my son mentioned it too. Like when you're watching this movie, the first like 25 minutes of it is tracking along. You're like really feeling the book come out. You're kind of feeling the story. There's some minor changes, but it's nothing unforgivable. And then all of a sudden you get to the scene with Harkonnen and you're like, well, this is a little weird. And then he gets up off of his table. And in the book, there's this mention of the fact that he's so enormous that he has to have repulsor lifts to hold up his weight just to be able to walk around. And
he's like a blimp.
And in the movie, the Baron floats. Like the Baron just gets up off the ground and starts floating around.
And he's not that fat. He's really not that big.
No, he's not that fat. He's really not that bad. You're right. And you're like watching this and you're going, what just happened? I'm not really sure where we just went with this. And it's comical. It's almost silly. Like it's almost it's almost too much. Yeah. And you either have to like lean into and embrace that at that point and like really go, okay, this movie's telling big story with these over the top futuristic things, right? Or you look at it and you go, this is ridiculous. I can't even take this seriously anymore. And I really think that's where that 52% comes from, right?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's where the movie falls down the most for me, is everything with the Harkonnens.
I would definitely agree with that. Yeah. They're
so from that to
too,
where you have
too much, right?
Yeah. They're like one-dimensional cartoon villains.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you could even make a fair criticism of the book where they almost verge on that in the book a little bit. But this movie just takes it and goes over the top with it. So I'll be interested to see what they do with the new movie and how they portray those characters.
Well, just judging from like the flashes from the trailer, it just looks pretty cool. Like what they're doing with those characters. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks amazing. The whole thing. And you were talking about the set design too, like the very open, very big, broad landscape of sets is interesting in the new take on it too.
Right, definitely.
Yeah. So, talking about the characters, I think it's important to mention that there were, some really big names involved in this movie. You got Sir Patrick Stewart, you got Kyle MacLachlan, Sean Young, who had been in Blade Runner just a few years previous, and Sting.
Yes, Sting.
Mysteriously, but fantastically in this movie. I think out of all of the Harkonnens, he played the character of Feyd Rautha so very well. So I don't know. I was looking. I had to look it up because I was like, okay, when did Sir Patrick Stewart? When did the Next Generation come out? And it wasn't until '87. So it was 3 years after this movie that he kind of hit that sci-fi mainstay. At least that I know of. I don't know of anything else that he was in other than these movies.
No, he was still, at this point, he was still basically an unknown Shakespearean actor. Yeah. I know this is his first big movie, but I enjoy the casting in most of the characters. I think are cast pretty well, like Max von Sydow as Layet. I think that's a good casting choice. Mm-hmm. I do not think that Patrick Stewart as Gurney Halleck was a good choice at all. The way you read him in the book, it talks about him being this big, burly dude with scars on his face. And I think at one point he even mentions how he just looks out of place in a crisp uniform, which is the opposite of Patrick Stewart.
Yeah. Right.
I think Josh Brolin is actually going to play him in the new movie, and that makes a lot of sense.
I was torn on whether it was him or is Jason Momoa doing Duncan Idaho then? That's
right, yeah.
Is that his character?
Yeah, which is another good casting choice.
Yeah, the cast obviously is awesome. I mean, like you said, it's Patrick Stewart's first big film, and my gosh, he does not age. And you have and Kyle MacLachlan. I mean, obviously David Lynch has used him in so many films, obviously Blue Velvet, and then, most famously Twin Peaks, the TV series. But this was his first, I think, role ever. I mean, from the research I did, I mean, they basically just found him in some small theater production and, rolled him into this iconic role. He's obviously older than Paul is in the book. That was, I guess, fans of the book were obviously upset about that. And I mean, I think his performance was okay. I think he's a better actor in his later stuff. But I love the casting, but for example, like Sting's character and even Patrick Stewart's character, it's kind of like what are they even doing in the movie? I mean, like Patrick Stewart's character is like he shows up, then he's gone, and then he's back again, and then Sting's character is kind of like the same thing. I mean, for obviously you guys know the characters more from the book, but for someone who just watched the movie, it's like, I don't know what point they were trying to make with these characters, other than some wacky scenes and that. Gosh, the scene with Patrick Stewart where they're doing that. What is it called? That when they were fighting
the shields.
They were boxy. I'm forgetting the word.
The shield. Yeah, the shield fighting.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, that is Lynch right there. Like that is. It's just so weird visually. Very much so, and I like that scene. I know I guess that scene's probably not everyone's favorite, but being a fan of Lynch, you can appreciate that scene. But yeah, gosh, like you can't say enough about the cast and I don't know if you mentioned this yet, but Toto doing the soundtrack.
Oh man, yeah, that was one of those things where like I really wish they had just leaned into that early, right? Because early on you get a feel that it's a movie, it's got this kind of normal soundtrack, and then as soon as they start writing the sandworms, the like total rock music pops in. And I wish they had just done that from the get-go. Like I think it really would have made a very different movie, and it would have been more coherent as a movie if they had just leaned into it all the way. Just let's go.
Well, I think Pink Floyd was when Alessandro Jarodowski was going to do the movie originally. Pink Floyd was going to do the soundtrack.
Yeah, that would have been
which I think in the new trailer for the new movie they actually have a Pink Floyd song, which is a reference to that. Mm-hmm. But I feel like if you're going to go with rock music, you just need to go all the way with it.
Oh man, have you guys seen the documentary on Jodorowsky's Dune?
I have, yeah.
We can do a podcast just on that. It's a fascinating, fascinating documentary. Yeah.
I'll have to watch it. I haven't watched it yet.
Great.
So there we go. All right.
Yeah, I was going to have Pink Floyd do the soundtrack, and Salvador Dali was going to be in the cast, and Orson Welles. Yeah. Oh, it's a trip.
Oh, I don't want to watch that documentary now. I want that movie.
You might get it. They're still trying to do it. I think they're trying to do an animated version of it, but it's crazy.
All right. Amazing.
Animated Dune would be really interesting. I've heard lots of rumors about that over the years, and I think that would be really cool. And I think I don't know if you guys have seen Flash Gordon, but that was Queen did the music for that one, and so there were some other instances of pop musicians doing the soundtracks. America did the soundtrack for The Last Unicorn, I believe, too, which was an animated movie that came out around the same time, and it's so. It wasn't unheard of, but at the same time, I think it was just, I think in this movie, they just didn't let them have enough leeway, which again, it kind of ties into that whole, what does the studio want? Which is why I think there was so much exposition and all of the other stuff that didn't feel like it fit the movie that Lynch was trying to make. And so, I would have loved a Toto track all the way through, because by the end you're like looking at it, it's like this is almost like a music video.
Yeah,
and you really do feel like that. And that was the comment that was going around my couch as we were watching this movie was, wow, it feels like a music video all of a sudden.
It's a space rock opera.
Let's go. So I think that was it was really interesting, seeing all the characters, but like you say, Andrew, it's really hard. Mm-hmm. My wife made the comment that it's like she needed a scorecard. She needed a sheet to keep track of everybody who was in and what they were and what they were doing. And so, and my son and I, having just read the book and me knowing the book as well as I did, we would talk about the character and how they got kind of stilted. Like the whole scene with Von Sydow's character, Leah Kynes, when they kill him, when the Harkonnens kill him, there's a reason to it. It's not just like this, wanton, oh, let's just send this old man out into the desert to die. And there's a reason that they do it the way they do. And then there's a whole scene that follows him and his death. And it's significant. It's really impactful, not only to the reader, but to the story as a whole. And it kind of just gets this one line picture in the movie.
I think that's one of the biggest problems with the movie too, is that none of the characters feel really fleshed out. So you don't really get any of their motivations beyond Paul is the good guy and the Harkonnens are the bad guys. And then everyone else is just kind of there.
And you don't even know that the way the movie goes, you start to question whether Paul is the good guy at all. You're kind of okay, he's I don't know if I'm really rooting for this guy by the end of the movie.
That goes into the other books too, but that's kind of beyond the scope of this.
And I think that was one thing that came through in the movie that I thought was really well done, is that you see this sort of maniacal fall, even as weird as it is. You kind of see the whole almost the religious tones of it that it begins to take.
Right.
And so, I think it's really hard to talk about Dune without talking about the larger concepts that it's dealing with, which is obviously this is a rich resource primarily held by a somewhat savage people in a desert, in a misunderstood situation. And it's the word jihad is used very often in the book, whereas in the movies, it's only mentioned once. I was really surprised to kind of catch that it only came up once and in kind of a throwaway scene. But I think it's really important, when you talk about this movie, kind of talk about the larger concepts of imperialism and little guy rising up against the the powers that be and all of that kind of stuff. And so I thought, how do you guys feel that came across in this movie?
I think it did a decent enough job of like introducing those concepts and those analogies, but the movie, I think, has a hard time. The movie doesn't really have a clear message by the end of it. You kind of watch this thing, and then it's like, I mean, it's a lot to take in, but at least for me, I came away with it like, not really sure what I just watched. I mean, there's a lot of moments, that I can look back to and say were cool, and a lot of stuff I didn't like and stuff I did like, and that was awesome. But as far as like, a message or some sort of theme that it wanted to kind of send home, not really sure. Was kind of confused by it, and I kind of attribute that to obviously the disjointedness, aspects of the film and all that we already touched on. But yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, maybe it had a lot to do with, like, I know David Lynch wasn't even a fan of the book when he took the job. He had never even read the book. So maybe he was just trying to apply. I mean, if you watch any of his films, you really don't, you have that question at the end of almost every David Lynch film, like, what the heck did I just watch, and what was he trying to tell me?
Right.
So
exactly.
This just did it in a way, I think, that didn't serve the property. But yeah, I mean, if you were to ask me, how well it did with those kind of concepts, I think it brought them to the forefront, but never really brought it home.
And I think a lot of it's hard to pick up on it unless you've read the book and you kind of know this is what happened in the book, and this is kind of what they're showing on screen, but you don't get all the context that you get when the book. Like the whole thing where with Paul and the prophecy and him being kind of the chosen one for the Fremen, that being kind of a thing that was set up by the Bene Gesserit. You don't really get that in the movie. It's more just a straight up chosen one hero story.
Yeah, there's so much exposition, and then so much is actually just kind of left out.
Yes.
It's like it's hard to reconcile the two of those things, but it is. I mean, it's a huge book, and it's hard to really. And it's funny because it's not a long book. It's not a particularly. It's not, I've read much longer books and seen movies made out of them that were just fine.
Right.
But there is just so much world building that's done with that kind of, Ernest Hemingway iceberg theory of the 10% of the story that you read is the only that 10% that's above the water, and the rest is just there unstated, and you as the reader kind of pick it up.
Right. And they do that thing. There's a lot of parts in the book where you see the people's thoughts and you get it in the italicized. Here's what they're thinking. There's a lot of that in the book. And they try to do that in the movie with these weird whispered voiceovers that always feel out of place.
Oh, they're so bad.
They come in at the weirdest times. And a lot of it, because I've been rereading the book in anticipation of the new movie, and a lot of the lines of dialogue in the movie are straight from the book, but they just feel so out of place and so awkward. And it's like, if you're making a movie, you need to be showing, not telling.
And but there's a lot of those that are really important to kind of moving the story along, or to trying to flesh out the characters, that it never really feels like it fully completes that.
Right.
And then the other thing that we were having a problem with, especially, my wife sitting watching it with me, she was like, are they reading each other's thoughts right now? Or is this just like for us? Like, is it an aside, or is it just them like actually reaching into each other's minds, or what? And with all of the other stuff that was going on in the movie, it was hard to tell. It was really genuinely hard to tell. It doesn't
come across clearly.
Yeah.
I'd almost like to see, I don't know if you have seen any Terence Malick films.
Oh, I love Terence Malick.
But he does an amazing job with conveying emotion in these scenes with no dialogue at all. And I think he's fantastic at that. And this movie is almost the opposite of that, where instead of just relying on the actor's emotions to convey what's going on, like there's a part in the movie where Leto is sitting there and he keeps whispering to himself that they tried to kill my son, which is straight from the book. But in the book, it makes sense because it's in this scene where he's contemplating taking over this planet and everything he has to do. But in the movie, it's just him standing there looking moody with that voiceover going, and it completely fails to convey any emotion.
Yeah.
Whereas you could have done that without any dialogue at all, and you could have gotten that point across.
Yeah, just a lot of, and it comes off as cheesy a lot too. It's and it's not in a good, it's campy, but not in a good way. Like I remember the scene where, where Paul sees Sean Young's character and the voiceover, the narration in his head is like, he said, it's like, oh, from my dreams, so beautiful. Like it was just, it was just so like, so out of place. And cheesy. And yeah, I agree. Those narrations, were just not really well executed. And from what I understand, a lot of them were put in, during reshoots and stuff like that when they were obviously had to cut down the movie's, length. They were just trying to shove in all that exposition and stuff into narrations, right. And that never works.
And voiceover went so well for Blade Runner in '82, right? That's,
oh my gosh! Started.
Just a general rule of general rule of movie making: if you have to voiceover, you did something wrong. That's just kind of gotta run with that theory. Going out. And so, I think we've mentioned a lot of other movies, and this was a really good time for like cult classics, right? Because you had in '82 you had Blade Runner. In '83 we were just finishing up the Star Wars series with Return of the Jedi. The same year this one came out, Terminator came out, and then in '85 Back to the Future. So like all compressed into this beginning of the '80s series was all of these amazing science fiction movies that have become, just pillars of movie. Like you meet people that were born in the 2000s that they know what Back to the Future is. They've seen Back to the Future, but it's not because it it's not because they remade the movie or they've made a sequel as they have done with a lot of this stuff. It's just because they've seen the movie because it's that good. And this one didn't quite like live up to that status, although like you say, it's getting kind of a revival now. It's still it's 52% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's never kind of gotten the same like you talk to people about it, and if people have seen it, they're like, oh, that movie. Right. So what do you think? I mean,
I really feel like this movie, it almost feels like a movie that came out before all those movies, like just the feel of it. This feels like something from like 1973, not 1983. Like it feels like a poorly done, like almost like a biblical epic. Like I would compare this more to Ben-Hur or 10 Commandments or something like that, just in the feel of it. Like it does not feel like a modern science fiction blockbuster film.
Right. Yeah. And it's just, I mean, those movies that you mentioned that are, favorites, they're good movies. This is not a good movie. Let's not fool ourselves. But I think also what has to do with all those other movies are action packed, and there is not a lot of action in this movie. And from what I understand of the book, that's also not the point of the book. There's not a lot of action in the book. So that probably has a lot to do with it. I mean, like again, I compare it to 2001 Space Odyssey because it's more of that heady, dialogue driven, weird sort of surreal sci-fi. And it obviously is not as good as 2001, but that's what it's more akin to than those other movies that are all popcorn, blockbuster, box office, mega hits. That really are all about the pleasure of the viewing audience and not trying to. They're not so dense and they're not so heady. So yeah, I think that, I mean, all those things together are just why it's more of the, like you said, the cult. It kind of has a cult status now, but it never really reached the heights of those films.
Yeah, and I think that. I think too, yeah, it's a lot of it's the story that it was trying to tell, and it's interesting because it has action, but like the action is that Toto music video at the end of the movie, right? And
slowly riding the sandworm,
exactly. and it's like, and that's it. It's quick, and then it's done, and you're like, oh, that was it. Okay. All right. But it's interesting too, because, you know, I see there were a lot of scenes in this one where the ships land and all the soldiers get off of them, and you get a real feel for like the Clone Wars, Star Wars kind of stuff, where they've, you know, got these huge ships and all of the soldiers are coming off in the thousands to land on this planet and subdue it. And, you know, so it's trying to tell that story, but it does lack that action. You're right. I think that's really probably the thing that hurt it the most. And it didn't really do as good a job, like you said, as 2001 of really driving that story home and making you feel a part of it, because it was just so compressed and disjointed and hard to follow at a lot of times.
It tries to ride the line too much between being a mainstream popcorn movie and then being a weird art house film. Like if it had gone in either direction, it would have been better, but it tries to ride the middle and it really doesn't stick it.
Yeah, I think they really should have just let Toto loose at the beginning and just gone with it, man.
If you had those guitars blaring from the beginning, then we would have known what we were getting into.
Go big or go home.
Exactly. Yeah. There wouldn't have been any confusion when the Baron Harkonnen started floating. It would have been like, yep, that's exactly what should be happening right now.
They really missed an opportunity. I see the rains down in Arrakis at the end when it starts raining.
Wow. Oh man. It would have been that would have been something else. So is there anything else that you guys thought of while watching this movie that you wanted to bring up?
I like miniatures and I like matte paintings, and I feel like we've lost that in movies nowadays, so I enjoy that aspect of it. I'd say that's definitely my favorite part.
Yeah, I mean, I think the what if David Lynch would have taken Return of the Jedi job over this, you know, maybe, I mean, I don't know, maybe it would have been better for him to work with George Lucas than the De Laurentiis family. Is that their names? Yeah. I think this one was, because they sort of had a reputation of being hard to work with. And then after this movie, after all the money it lost and the kind of the hit they took to their reputation, they never really did anything as expensive or epic again. But yeah, I just think of like, man, I for a filmmaker that I do appreciate a lot, again, not a fan of all of his work, but for a good portion of it, I would love to see him try and tackle, you know, another, you know, property or big budget studio film. But I mean, but I'm happy enough, you know, watching the stuff that he does now. And yeah, it's just funny just seeing all these different actors in this wild cast, you know, during a time where a lot of them were either unknowns or kind of like unique choices. So yeah, still a lot to appreciate all these years later. Yeah,
well, I think the main actor, the main star that we need to mention is Sir Patrick Stewart's mullet. And those last few battle scenes, because man, that was crazy. Yeah, so I think for me, like, I can appreciate this movie more with time. I think that's been like my biggest, and part of that is just that I have come to the, you know, realization in my life that I never expect a movie to be anything like the book. I treat them as completely separate things, no matter how good or how close the movie cleaves to the book. I'm treating them as completely separate things, because there's always the vision in my head when I read a book is not the vision that's going to come across on the screen. And the more you can do that, the more you can really enjoy life, right? In general, I think. But specifically, the more you can start to enjoy a movie. And you know, I love talking with you guys about this, especially with you know, Andrew, with your knowledge about the movie industry and what you bring to it. It's a really good addition to thinking about this movie, because you have to kind of dive into that. But why did it happen this way? And knowing a little bit about David Lynch and some of his other stuff really helps. So.
Right. The behind the scenes of this movie is really one of the most fun parts about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, just getting a view of like what was going through everybody's head while they were making it. Cool. All right. Well, that's it from us. What did you, the listener, think about David Lynch's Dune, either the first time you saw it or on a rewatch? Be sure to email us or comment on our Facebook or Twitter page and let us know. You can email us any feedback by finding StarQuest on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, and you can tweet us on Twitter at SQPN. We'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Movie and TV. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Movie and TV and all the shows here at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Also, be sure to subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or on the SQPN YouTube channel. To find previous episodes of Secrets of Movie and TV shows, please visit sqpn.com/secrets of movie and TV shows. That's with dashes between all of them. Next time we'll be talking about next time this group of us meets, we'll be talking about the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries. And we'll get to the book at some point, but I want to give Andrew some time to read it first.
Absolutely.
We might not have watched the entire miniseries, but I think you can get a feel for it. And so, if you can find it, I think it is on YouTube. So if you're interested in watching before we get to it, the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries is there. So we will get to the book, but, that's it. And then we're pushing really to kind of, spread these out over until October of next year, when we can then finally do a review of the new movie when it finally does come out in whatever format that ends up being. So until our next time when we are talking about the miniseries, thank you for joining me, Andrew Hermes.
Thank you. Pleasure's all mine.
And thanks for sharing The Secrets of Dune with me, Jack Barazzini.
The spice must flow.
It must flow. And once again, I'm Thomas Senherho. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Movie and TV on StarQuest.